welcome all. And today is really a follow-on from last week, or some might be joining you, but we're doing another one of last week's tomorrow same time. So feel free to jump on there as well. At the end of last week, really asked for people to do some homework and just calculate the gap between their first lambers, or their, I guess, traditional first lambers, versus their mixed age ewes. And we also asked for things that worked and things that haven't worked. Anyone want to tell us what their gap is? We've already heard from Daniel, it's sort of 15%, which is...
Just on that though, Ferg, probably our scanning gaps probably seem to be about 15 to 20 as well. So, So I think our survival this year in our maidens was about 71 and our adults average 78.
And I guess one advantage for the maidens is that often you've got less twins, obviously, so it helps the survival a bit.
Yeah.
What was their scanning roughly?
126.
Yeah, really.
We join in end of December joining.
Yeah. And so mixed age to 140 odd.
Yeah, 141 to 152.
Yeah, right. Cool.
Where are you, Daniel? Where are you farming?
Yeah, just north of Wagga, in between Junee and Gundagai.
Cool. What's your gap, Jill?
About 32%.
Oh, right. Even this year? Or I guess this was the...
Yeah, this year. So they scanned at 153 and only made 100%, where the others were like scanning at 183 and made 132%.
Yeah, right.
So I've got some survivable, more things to do.
Yeah. That's all right. Plenty of time. Cool. Do you know your numbers, Leslie?
Well, we're not comparable at all, Ferg. We're smaller than you. Obviously, we're in a very different situation. We're lambing inside. So I have to report basically that we scanned at 175% and 175% were born. So
and how many?
And they all survived. They all survived. No deaths. But we're only lambing 150 ewes last year. So, it's tiny by comparison. But nonetheless, it's important for us to keep tabs on those figures and make sure we don't have any problems. And it's something we keep an eye on. And we, even at those low numbers, we're untypical of UK farmers. The vast majority of people will lose between scanning and birth and then continue to lose after birth. So we're very fortunate that we don't, but then being the operation that we are, we put a hell of a lot of work into making sure everything survives because we can't really afford to lose a life. So we're not typical, but we're not complacent either.
And what are your young ewes, like your old 90-month-old joined ewes? Do they scan the same, or are they?
No, they scan at a lower rate, but I'm talking about the whole mob average. They will scan. I mean, most of them will have a single. It's rare for them to have a twin because we're based quite heavily on Saxon genetics, so they're not that prolific.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much 100%, 110%, something like that in the maiden ewes.
Yeah, right.
But they all survive. That's the key thing. Whatever is there in scanning gets through to being born.
It's interesting because even and this is off the track, but even in my PhD, which was lambing maiden ewes, and they were like, even in single pens inside, I still lost 5 or 6%. I'm obviously not as good at it as you are, Leslie.
They're born at a good heavy weight. I mean, average birth weight last year was 4.8 kilos, which helps.
Definitely. Nugget, do you know what your maidens do versus your mixed age scanning?
In terms of, sorry, I missed the start of it.
Scanning. So scanning percentage first, not your ewe lambs, your traditional.
Well, if they haven't had a lamb as a ewe lamb, they're generally running at 20 to 25% less.
Yeah, right.
Than our older ewes. So probably running about 125 versus sort of 148 to 160% immature age ewes.
Yeah, right.
We're running, you know, sort of 10-year average.
Yeah, cool. Martin, do you know your data?
Is that me?
Yeah, mate.
I don't know what happened then. I'm not 100% sure what Josh's figures were. Last reporters, I think our maidens were about 145 or 150, and we scanned up around 167 or 170.
Yeah.
But that's in the composites.
Yeah.
I know across farm, I think he ended up with everything 174. But the weaning data has just come through, as you probably know. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
We scanned on the average across farm with everything, it was 193. That's including that dud merino we had. Or the one that didn't like the merinos, I should say, the Highlander.
As I say, it was a dud
the
Highlander.
racist one. The racist one.
Anyone else got, I'm not sure which David that is, but maiden ewes versus mixed age ewes scanning? No comment.
Marcus, James speaking. I've got my numbers
again. That was a bit.
if you would like them.
Yeah, cool.
Our mixed age ewes scanned at 151%, and we would have lost 10% fetuses in them. Our maiden scanned at 116%, and we lost none. So, funnily enough, the maidens actually performed better than the mixed age on average, but we had less of them, so there was less opportunity for variation with them.
Why do you think that, James? Because that's fantastic for you.
Yeah, look, they were a different line, so it could be a genetic influence there. Yeah, because they were all run and managed the same. So yeah, potentially that is just down to the difference between the lines.
Does anyone think it's that the old clover's got much to do with it? There's been a bit of talk about that.
I don't know how much is still around the estrogenic clover. Tom, have you got?
Yeah, look, it's getting a second lease of life. I think I've just never rated it, to be honest. You know, for the last 20 or 30 years, but there's a big project out of UWA and they're pushing it pretty hard, but I haven't seen too much data yet to try to quantify, you know, what the effect might be. But yeah, I thought it was an old issue myself, but that could be being ignorant as well.
Let's get a bit of press, that was all.
Yeah, get a lot of press.
Can I just ask about that clover? Is there any evidence, because there's been talk over here in the UK, that if you feed clover intensively to ewes when they're actually pregnant with ewe lambs, that you might have long-term impact on that ewe lamb's fertility? Have you heard anything about
grazing from estrogenic clover?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything, Leslie, on that.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a thought, because it's quite tempting to do that, particularly in late gestation.
Yeah.
Because that's when all the ewe lamb's eggs are already on board by late gestation.
Yeah.
So whether it has an effect on how those eggs develop during that animal's life.
Yeah, we certainly can't comment on clover, but from the Lifetime Wool Project, and there's been a little bit of discussion. I think you might have been on Twitter during the week. I mean, back with, you know, in the early 2000s, I mean, we had extreme nutritional treatments through pregnancy to day 90 and then thereafter. So Fergie did all the work, but I mean, maybe condition score 1.7 to nearly 4 at lambing. And then we measured the performance of all the progeny, the wethers and the ewes throughout their lifetime. And there was no impact on, and we're talking, you know, let's say 1,000 ewe progeny, and there was no effect on their lifetime reproduction.
Well, that's encouraging, because it's an obvious way of moving forward and feeding a good protein crop to them, rather than having to. Here we have to buy in concentrates, so feeding a clover crop would be much better. So that's encouraging. Thanks for that.
There's a little bit of work in the UK, probably in the 80s now, where they certainly differentially fed to weaning in maternal breeds, and did get an effect on lifetime productivity, reproductive performance, but we certainly didn't see it in merinos.
Right. Well, I've got merinos, so I'll stick with your work.
So Tomo, is that to do with the age of weaning?
Yeah, look, don't know. Look, it's really one piece of work only. There's across other data sets, I'm not convinced we can play around, manipulate, influence reproductive performance over their life.
Because we got a bit of feedback on that with the dairy sheep, that if you wean the ewe lambs too early, or they're off the milk too early, and they even talked about putting powder within their supplements, it hinders the maturity of their reproductive organs. It'll affect the lambs later on, or affect them later on in life.
Yeah. Is that I know nothing about that, but is that fatty? Is it the heifer thing too? Is it the fatty udder syndrome or something? Isn't there something about overfeeding?
It come from Rick White.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you know Rick of it. He's a bayer now, or grower, or whatever they call themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's extremely early weaning, obviously, for a milk drop.
18 days.
Yeah.
You're right.
Was what they're looking at, yeah.
Cool. So I think, I don't know if we missed anyone. Shout out if we have.
Can I just ask James?
Steve, do you want to tell us your numbers?
Sorry, Ferg. James, was that 0 losses?
There's people hiding it.
You said fetal losses, but is that 0 losses to marking?
Even through to weaning and beyond.
Right.
Yeah, they've done very well.
So what's the bloodline of them, James? Like if it is a genetic thing, what was the different line?
So this was a line of Doonies. So we've got 3 different merino types, and all of the maidens that we joined early this year were all from the same line of Dooney.
So have you got any mature age Doonies to see if it follows through? Like, is there a...
No, that was, it was actually an experimental line that we bought in sort of at the last minute, actually. And we've actually since bought more, and we've bought some rams from the same stud as well, because we've been so impressed with what we've seen so far. I'll be watching it over time, and
that's a big difference in the number of lambs if that goes all the way through. And I'm surprised it's just coming to the focus now, sort of thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the potential is massive.
20% upside.
Well, for sure, and the stud reports a long-term weaning percent themselves of 138, which is pretty bloody good, certainly in tight conditions where they're located as well.
So they're on a nutrition-wise, they're a bit risky. Like, they're not overfed. It's just where they come from.
Not, in fact, quite the opposite. They came to me completely unfed, as in they'd been on very poor pasture and absolutely 0 supplementary grain. They came in an average of 3.1 condition score, which I was absolutely blown away by. They went straight in with the rams and conceived straight away. They had only half the teasing time of the main mob as well.
Wow, that's outstanding.
I'm blown away by the performance I've seen. Yeah.
Where's that stud, up in the middle of New South or something? Is it?
No, they're Pingrup, WA.
Okay. WA, okay.
Yeah. Sired by these ones were pure purely theirs, but this year we've joined them to some Mujapin rams, and having a look at their progeny now. So a few different lines and mixes going on, just to keep things interesting.
Oh, well done, I reckon.
Yeah, good fun.
Cool. So I don't know if we missed anyone, but I guess as we expect and as we see, there's that drop off for those younger ewes in terms of scanning and often survival as well. Other part of your homework was to tell us about something that you've done that's worked for your ewes that lamb at 24 months of age, and something that hasn't worked. Has anyone got any stories for us?
Well, the mob size helped a little for us, but I probably didn't give them the best paddocks. That was probably my error. But,
as in they were not as much feed or not much shelter, or
shelter. One of them didn't have as much feed as everyone else, but to be honest, I was looking after my older ewes that had the better genetics. They got the cream paddocks with the shelter and everything, and then the maidens probably a bit more exposed compared to some of the mixed age. So
yeah, okay,
that's probably my error.
No.
So they might change around next year when they're all first crosses or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Promoted.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned during last one that in one of the better years we kept some of our maiden ewes that we would have normally culled out, and we tried a low birth weight terminal over them, and that worked well.
Yeah, okay.
Their survival was better than the other ones that we joined to our normal.
Yeah, right. Yep. So you get that lift of just lamb vigor, and obviously, the that lamb vigor can actually change maternal behaviour. So that's you get a combination of a stronger lamb and a mum that has her hormones switched on a bit more.
Yeah, okay, and new mortality was down too with that lot.
Yeah, righto. What terminal did you use, just out of interest?
Charolais.
Oh, yeah, righto. That's probably the $1 million question often, is which one you used in that job. But
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah.
There's any recommendations from other people's success?
I can tell you success and horror story of a breed pretty much. So I think some of the, like using some of the maternal breeds as a kind of terminal in merinos seems to go pretty well. But
like a Highlander or something.
Yeah. We haven't got any data on sire breed, Tomo, have we?
Trying to think. Yes, we will. We'll have that out of the INF flocks. So we'll have merino by merino and merino by terminal and merino by maternal.
Yeah.
And the birth weight survival responses, the responses were all very similar in terms of a little bit of what I presented last week in terms of how their birth weights might have changed in response to nutrition, obviously on the ewe side, but you shift birth weight up to varying degrees depending on your cross, but there was no drastic change in the birth weight survival responses for those different combinations.
So it's just a straight birth weight improvement.
Mainly driven by change in birth weight. Yeah.
Any thoughts on how that would improve or reduce lamb or ewe mortality?
No, not off the top of the head.
Was that significant, Daniel? The shift in ewe mortality?
From memory, it was worth remembering anyway. They lambed a little bit later, and probably could have been other factors. Could have been feed, could have been shelter. Might have had an influence.
Yeah.
What's everyone's effect on mismothering, and how many they reckon they lose because of that in multiples? Because of disturbance, I suppose, is the biggest thing there.
I mean, the whole...
Well, just across the board, You know, it's always argument if you're running a stud and you're weighing, you're getting around them, how many you're actually, with your mismothering figures, how many are you disturbing, how much are they actually being affected?
Yeah, I mean, most of the ones that if you autopsy heaps of lambs, lots of them go down to or assumed mismothering or exposure, and it's hard to know. Like a lot of them don't have, a lot of them haven't. A lot of them have stood up and had something, but then have perished, and that's often blamed on mismothering. So I mean, that's why the mob size thing works.
Yeah, especially with multiples too, I think.
Yeah.
If he gets one or two of them.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a massive issue. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the downfalls of going around and use it lambing for like a stud, lambing at birth, like tagging at birth, that sort of stuff. You're going to upset some. That's just part of the tax of being a Rambler, Martin.
I know, I was disappointed with what ours were in the end from where we started, and they're telling me all that stuff, and I know it's real, but it's just how do you get around it?
Yeah. But yeah, when you've got a lot of anyway, there's an argument that it's good in a stud sense because you find those ewes that stand over their birth site better.
Yeah, and you weed them out over time.
Yeah. Any other things that have worked? Not worked? Anyone tried mixing older ewes with young ewes or any of that sort of caper?
Yeah, we've done that, Ferg. Yeah, I think there's some value in it, in having some older ewes with younger ewes. I couldn't give you figures, but obviously if you breed a few rams, you often have your line mixed up, and whether they lamb better because they're better genetics or whether they're because they're with a mix of ages, I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I wouldn't put old ewes with young ewes just because of the fact that old ewes will tend to take away, or they could take away lamb, particularly at the beginning of lambing. We've done maidens with older ewes before, but yeah, try not to do it as much as we can now, just because of that fact.
Wasn't there a bit of work recently that suggested that perhaps you should lamb your maidens away from and out of sight of your older ewes? I thought I saw an article. Tomo, do you know what I'm talking about?
Seen that one, Leslie. There was a bit of work out of Wagga Wagga of combining them. And I thought it was a little bit patchy, the evidence, as to whether there was any clear case to combine hoggets at least, or maidens at least, with adults.
There was something floating around on the Twitter sphere. I can't remember. Yeah, it was that Charles Sturt paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'd be interested in how your target joining weights may have changed. Has there been any in your maidens, over the last 5 years or something? Are you more conscious of hitting certain targets and what they might be? What about you, Nugget? What have you? I mean, obviously you're joining new lambs, but what sort of targets?
Yeah, well, I suppose in this conversation we're putting more emphasis on joining ewe lambs as opposed to traditional maidens. So, I guess the background story to us, we've been joining ewe lambs since 2011. So 2010 drop was the first year, and tried plenty of different things working along with Ferg and Tomo and Murdoch Uni. So I guess what we've found over the past is we try and get our singles to be about 42, 43 kilos and growing at a minimum of sort of 180 to 200 grams head a day. But found that twin lambs, particularly natural born twin lambs, can be we'll sort of accept them as low as 38 kilos, but they'll have to be growing at 250 as an average. And that seems to work really quite well. Short joining periods, all teased, obviously. And we're getting our sort of running or last rolling 5-year average is about 60%. That's lambs on the ground to use join. So I'm not happy with that. We want to get it to 100 eventually, but every year we're learning something different.
That's rams in at 7 months old or 8 months old? Or
that's rams in at anywhere from 6.5 to 7 months old. Yep.
Yeah.
So some will be 6 months old. We're not getting a great result with those. Obviously, the ones born earlier in the month of July, we're sort of July lambers, so they generally do a lot better. But yeah, it's just really trying to keep everything in line for us. We're getting shorter seasons over here in WA, and it's really trying to keep the lambing really quite compressed so that we've got green grass at the back end of the, like for the weaning type thing, and we've got, you know, a longer period of time to get the ewes in lambs. So that's really the reason why we try and keep them in line with the main joining. They are 2 weeks staggered, so they're sort of mid-February to mid-March join. But yeah, that's really as late as we want to go away from the main joining, I guess, for us. Typically, we're typically only getting sort of 12 weeks of green grass a year now. So yeah, we've got to really make it work for us while we got it.
What's your conception on there, Nugget? You say what, 60%?
No, it's 60% lambs. So we did 77% this year. The year before we had a terrible result. We're only sort of 45, but we've been as high as 90% conception. So. And
what is that seasonal? What's
I think so. I think so, and also a bit of weight too. I reckon if they're growing quicker. Some years they're a bit better set up with the spring, so they're a lot easier to get up to that. You know, ideally I'd like to get them heavier at joining, but what we've discovered through with Tomo and Ferg is that we can go light if necessary, as light as 38 kilos in twins. But that's with our genetic fat as well. So that's helped us go a little bit lighter. So yeah, if we've got a good spring, it certainly is a lot easier, and we'll get them up to sort of, 46, 47 kilos for joining. I don't think we need to get them to 60 kilos for joining. I really don't. They end up being monstrous. So.
And what's the difference at 46 kilos then? What's your conception rates up by?
I'd have to have a look at the data, Martin. I'm not overly prepared for this side. I wouldn't be able to put a figure on it, to be honest, but it'd have to be somewhere around 20-25%, I would say.
You're in the Mujibin data sets, 4 to 5% per kilo. Yeah. So for every extra kilo joining an extra, reproduction.
There you go. So from 42 kilos to 46, there you go. We're at our 20%. So.
Good guess, Nugget.
Yeah.
I reckon ours would be the same. They were in maternals.
So anyone with sort of not mating new lambs, how often are we weighing a ewe leading into, from weaning to her joining? Do they ever get weighed, or like 0 to monthly? What's the range?
Yeah, ours is probably has been 0 Ferg, but we shear in September, and you're off the board. In the past we've just had a look at them and thought, geez, they need feeding up, or they'll be right. We sort of run them as probably glorified wethers for that first 18 months, but that's something we've changed with our grazing crops and winter feed gaps and stuff like that the last couple of years, where that body weight's been more of a target now, and the scanning results have shown through that.
Right. Cool. Yeah. And so that's still the iometer, or a little bit of weighing, or?
No, still just by eye. Yep.
Yeah. Anyone?
And condition score.
Yeah. Anyone done any? I guess, Nugget, you do to meet your targets. Does anyone else do any weighing to try and hit a particular target for that young ewes?
What we were doing was condition scoring on a regular basis on the lead up. We weren't weighing, but certainly monitoring condition, and then tracking that through to see if there's a correlation between the condition and conception rate. So that was an interesting exercise we ran this year.
And did that do what we would expect, or was it correlated?
Yeah, it was, and I was aiming for a fairly high condition score to see if the higher condition score led to more multiples without wanting to go to triplets. And so we were aiming for 3.3 to maximise the twinning. And certainly condition score we found to be correlated very positively with conception.
Yeah, cool.
So we should weigh as well as condition score. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess for young sheep, I think it pays to. I think it's useful to, because you're basically on a track to the day the ram goes out from the day they're weaned, and there's different times of the year where it makes sense to put that weight on, and then there's other times where it sort of makes sense to be in a holding pattern because it's too hard, or as long as you're not going backwards, it's okay. Or even backwards is all right, as long as they're not too young at that point because they start dying. So I guess weighing. I guess weighing is probably the handiest tool for that job, and then, but then condition score once they're older use. But if you're a proficient condition scorer and can kind of monitor that, I guess then both obviously work. But I think it's an easier for those young sheep, something it's a bit more driving for a particular live weight is something that we sort of have people doing. What's the weaner course showed that condition score or live weight was interchangeable even in young sheep, was it, Tomo? Or?
Yeah, there's not a lot of data, believe it or not, in 20-month-olds, but relating condition score to reproductive performance.
Yeah, right.
As I said last week, there's a fair bit of live weight data around and sort of suggesting 1.3 to 1.5% per kilogram, so less responsive than adults and a lot less responsive than ewe lambs, which is a bit fascinating in itself. But my advice in 20-month-olds would be to weigh if you can, but if it's too hard, condition score is next best. And that same applies for ewe lambs. I think that condition scores, it's cream on the cake, but live weight's the main driver.
And I guess a kilo being 4%, well, if it's in ewe lambs at least, then you're hard to pick up that in a condition score. Yeah. So I guess the point of I guess this evening and this project is to try and understand I guess opportunities to improve maiden ewe performance and I guess to talk through things that people think would be useful to actually trial, and then ultimately we're looking for some people to actually run those trials. And so the PDS is which is funded by MLA, is around basically having your standard practice for how you would normally run them, and then kind of bringing in a best bet, which, as we discussed last week, we don't know all the answers on what a best bet is, so it's going to be literally a bet. But we know the principles. But as Tomo's covered today and last week, is that there's lots we still kind of aren't aware of. So I guess, has anyone got any thoughts on what we should be trialing? And so I guess it's things that you've heard or things that you'd like to see compared for maiden ewe performance.
Have you done anything with Campivax, Ferg?
Well, it's certainly has been done, but certainly that could be one thing. Looking at vaccinations for the abortive diseases. I think kind of in New Zealand, at least, it's pretty standard practice just to jab them in, just to get everything jabbed, because it looks, on average, I think it's a sort of 10% improvement, but that's here, not where you guys are.
We've tried it, but haven't seen significant improvement, I don't think, to warrant doing it. But once you start doing it, it's hard to sort of stop doing it. It's one of those things that it's like, the fertiliser you put on your pastures, like, well, you may not, you know, see what's happening, but, you know, don't want to stop doing it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
in a little while, Hamish, we thought we'd get Caroline Jacobson on one of these Zooms. I mean, Caroline's got a pretty reasonable or big project now, looking at, I mean, I think there's 30 farms across the country, looking at, I guess, incidents of fetal losses, you know, when they're occurring and what's causing them. And the plan is to come up with, I guess, a bit of a risk matrix. I mean, you know, whether your neighbours are losing them or, you know, environmental conditions, attitude to risk, whatever it might be. Because I think a lot of people probably are vaccinating that don't have to, but it's, you know, it's a bit like minerals sometimes, isn't it? It's not costing an arm and a leg, it's insurance.
I mean, we did the trial with Tom.
Of course, you're one of the sites.
The 2018.
Yeah.
And so half of the drop we injected with Cambivax and the other half we didn't. But there was no significant difference to suggest that it was that or wasn't. So it was, there wasn't even a massive increase in birth weight either. So it wasn't, really at the end of the day, we didn't know how it was really to be analysed, to be honest. Which is not good.
Yeah, so I guess we, we can get, Caroline can run us through those. Any other thoughts on, I guess, A, things that you've always wanted to try but you haven't, or B, any interest in actually being a guinea pig?
Well, like Hamish, we're more wanting to push the joining of ewe lambs. Yeah. So very interested to adopt best practice and sort of follow that through and see how we can improve over time. I'd be keen to do something along those lines potentially.
Yeah.
I think Josh
what
will be
talking about here, James, doesn't preclude producers of joining ewe lambs, because I mean, I think one of the main reasons people don't join ewe lambs is because of their hogget or their 20-month-old performance. So I think, establishing targets and demonstrating them, as in joining targets at 20 months of age for those that have had lambs as a ewe lamb is still something that could well be worthwhile demonstrating. The producer's call here, it's not mine, but
I reckon Josh will be into it, Ferg, but whether it fits the criteria with the way we do things, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll keep your contemporary groups a bit tighter, I think.
Yeah, I know. That's why.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess there's been quite a focus here of a lot of merino producers in New Zealand, and I guess it's been the things that have been trialled have been, the big focus has been mating weight, and so there's been a lot of effort around getting ewes up to mating weight, or up to as heavy as possible, and that is out to 60 kilos. As these are 20-month-old, not ewe lambs, and so the people that are probably nailing that the best are those that have, every year they just put a bit more weight on those ewes, and the better the whole thing goes, and they're doing that through monthly weights and really, really targeted. So I think it'd be nice to have a few sites or a couple of sites where we just go, we do some really intense, some monthly, 6-weekly weighing or whatever, and feed a bit extra into some and just see what the scale of that difference is. Certainly no one here has done the control versus the treatment, but sort of year on year is always increasing, and those that get better and better at feeding those ewe lambs. And I guess, the comment before that they're the pseudo weathers on farm is the reality, and I'm not sure how we get around that, but we're pretty confident that that's contributing to their reproductive reductions. I think this sort of concept of whole of life performance, where you just, if they take a check, it's kind of an opportunity. There's an opportunity cost of that check, and that might be, you might be able to justify that opportunity cost, but there's definitely going to be a cost. So I guess best bet probably is going to be keeping them going forward. Tomo, do you reckon?
Yeah, there's a said last week, Ferg, I think in the absence of having the, I guess, best bet totally nailed, I'm happy to bet that, you know, standard reference weight targets won't be 80%, like we've said forever. You know, the modelling that we have done, which has been mainly for systems where they've joined as a ewe lamb, the targets for 20-month-old are coming out at, you know, 90 to 100%. You know, as I said, probably closer to 90% for merinos and closer to 100% for maternals. So that's a pretty substantial shift in what we might have done for the last 20 years or forever. So, I mean, it'd be great, you know, yes, we need to confirm that with some pretty robust numbers and the best knowledge we have to this point, but then it would be great to use this group at network over the next few years to get it actually validated on a few sites.
Yeah, and we could get, we might get Gundy on for a chat too, who's sort of over the last 5 years, he's now mating at pretty much a mature weight, so they're, so a normal 19-month-old, but they've hit their full mature weight by that point. And he's closed the gap pretty significantly, I think. I don't want to make up the numbers because I'll get them wrong, but certainly the best 2-2 scanning getting around this part of the world for a formal sheep anyway. The other thing that's been played with here is, and it might be more for the later lambers, is, and this is in people that aren't joining new lambs, but putting teasers out pre-shortest day the year before, so giving some ovulations or getting the ewes ovulating in that as a 7-month-old, even though you're not going to mate them until they're 19 months. There's some sort of farmer trials been run on that, and I haven't seen the results, but that's something that's been played with. But that's maybe a feature of the timing in New Zealand. Yeah, maybe just a feature of the later lambing here and how the short day is working, and but yeah, not sure on that one. What's the is there any, so James is keen to have a crack. Is anyone else interested in having half their ewes doing something different to the other half, or not even halves, just some ewes doing something different?
We generally just tend to run them all as one mob, the whole, and up until classing, to help with that classing factor. But
yeah,
I can't see how it could be done, but how we could fit it in splitting up the mobs.
Because you're ram breeding as well, so you want them all together. Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
More than happy to do something, Ferg, if you need a hand with something. Obviously got ewe lambs that didn't make weight up this year for joining, so they can muck around with those, or vice versa, can do something with current ewe lambs coming up for this join if you want, but I know this is more about that 20-month-old sort of joining, so happy to.
Oh no, it's either way. Yeah, right. Thanks, Nugget.
I reckon there's a couple of ways to look at it, and I think, yes, we obviously have some obligations to NLA, but I think there is a lot of flexibility here, and very much driven by what you and the broader network. I think we had, 18 months ago when Ferg floated this with the Next Gen network, I think there was about 30 across the network who expressed in a couple of days that they would even be keen to run sites or something. So it's fantastic you guys can join, but I think it'd be good to picture it as the bigger network. And I think sure, we need to have 8 sites or whatever it is where, we'll compare A versus B that you want us to compare. But I think the other level of involvement is just collecting maybe a bit more data yourself. I would love, and the most obvious one to me is live weight at joining. If we could, and given there's 50 of you, if we had 20 farmers on this line right now that could all share, the relationships between live weight at joining and their subsequent repro rates, I think we'll collectively learn a whole lot more. Because as I said last week, it's been a bit of a black hole. We've done a heap of work with adults and a heap of work with 7 to 10 month olds, But maidens have sort of fallen through the crack a little bit more, and they're really, really important. So I think, one, there's the sites, and through the project we can provide some limited assistance with that. It is maiden. It comes back to the farmers collecting the data, but there can be some support. But I mean, the other level, if we're a breeder or it doesn't fit, just collecting good data would also make a good contribution, I think, to our discussions over the next few years.
And Tomo, within that, the Rambro's on here where that weight can be, like where there's EID involved and stuff, it can be like a direct individual as well as the mob sort of stuff. The heavier use in the mob scan more or whatever.
I think you've got all ours, Ferg, when I think about it.
Yeah, no, we would have all yours. Yeah, probably got all nuggets too. Yeah.
I think probably another thing too, like regardless of if ewe lambs conceive or not, if we're looking after them in that first 6 to 7, 8 months of life, like they're going to go and get the heads cut off, so to speak, their performance as an 18 or 20 month old ewe is vastly improved. Like we're seeing huge increases in scanning rates, whether they've had lambs or not, and as long as we've looked after them through the summer, there's a massive difference. So all of a sudden you go from that 120, 125 to, pretty well much the same as the older ewes. So maybe we just need to be looking after them a hell of a lot better in that first 6 to 7 months of life, and it just makes their next 10 to 12 months of life just so much easier just to skip through, as opposed to getting 6 months out from joining as a 1-year-old going, holy heck, we've got a fair bit of work to do with these ewes to get them up. Maybe we just need to really concentrate on that first part of life, because that's where it's all, well, we've found it's all set up. The ewes that don't make weight here are treated very much like wethers sort of thing, and then we get to this time of the year and you go, holy heck, we've got a lot of work to do to get these up to joining, and they're never as good, and lifetime production as well. We're just those ones that do conceive or have been in that part of the program just perform their whole life.
I think you just nailed it, Nugget. And I think, if we could, because again, we want to measure, performance as a 32-month-old as well. And a bit of evidence I presented last week was that, where we do have an effect of, hogget weight versus performance as a hogget, those that are bigger, they also perform better as the following year and the following year. Okay. Yeah. And I think Ferg and I are both from the same school as you, that without solid evidence, that if you bore them along in the first 10 months of life, I'm pretty sure as well that there is a long-term benefit. They might end up at the same hogget weight, but you get them there through doing it all, or doing a little bit more in that first 7 to 10 months. I suspect they'll actually perform better than just doing it all in late spring.
Yeah. So our 14-month-old ewes this year, I did everything textbook as much as I could, and they weaned out at 72 kilos. So they're 14 months old. They've just weaned lambs that were 28 kilos themselves, and they're sort of 72 kilos. I think that's still too heavy, but that's adult weight, and we're sort of job done. We're right to go for the next joining. So I think we're going to just take a line ball approach from now on. If they sort of, with the odd exception, from where they've sort of come from, I think if they don't make joining weight, we're just going to sell them this year as ewe lambs. Let someone else muck around with them. They'll be still good breeding ewes for someone, but if they're not getting up to that sort of 40, 42 kilos for us by, 7 months of age, maybe let someone else play with them, especially with our tough seasons over here.
Is that for both singles and twins, Margaret?
Yep. We allow 4 kilo spread between singles and twins at joining. But yeah, every year we sort of change that slightly as well. So we do allow a spread for sure.
Yeah.
Let me know when they're on Auctions Plus, mate.
Yeah, right. I'll send you a message. But I don't know. Is that the right thing to do?
I think way back when Youngie first did the modelling of mating ewe lambs, the part of the profitability in it was killing those that didn't make it. Oh no, that was killing ewes that you put to the ram and didn't get pregnant, wasn't it? Yeah, it's different.
I think we'd be hard pressed to knock the heads off the ones that don't get in lamb until we really iron out all the creases.
Yeah, so I guess the only counter argument for your that theory is that if they're born at
they're born last, out of a ewe lamb,
and born last day of lambing, then it's a pretty so.
That's why I said if the exception. Whereas if they're born on the in the first cycle of our lambing, and they're not that 40 kilos, we'll ship them off.
Yeah. And I guess this all comes back to the whole point of what we're talking about is once you've got reproduction, you've got power of that's the snowball effect of repro. You can do those kind of things because you've got replacements coming through when you're running 8-year-old ewes and weaning 70%. You haven't got those options. You have to keep everything. So that's the beauty of those sort of decisions is once you focus on reproduction, the options start expanding for you. Any so process going forward is we're going to we'll obviously everyone that's signed up to this will continue to get emails from us around maidens, and we'll have other speakers on and sort of keep that conversation going. We'll bed down some direct sites, but and we'll clarify some sort of simple protocols that as many people as we can to start getting data. And as Tomo's pointed out, we're happy to crunch the data if people will collect it. In terms of just even without splitting anything up, just recording some data on individuals if you can. But we'll keep that conversation live. I guess opportunity now just to throw in any questions, general questions around maidens. Something I don't know if you've watched, something you thought of last week or just wanted to know, or something you'd like to clarify, or a point you've got to make. Happy to have a yarn.
Yeah, Ferg, I was going to say it'd be interesting to run a trial with number of lambs weaned, lambs born. So you've got rams up in the positive 30, 40s, whereas you could have a comparison to, there's quite a few rams that are down well into the negatives. So just direct comparison between rams that are performing massively compared to others that are really underperforming in that regards.
Yeah, so we've got the other PDS, which I will need to be running one of these very shortly, is exactly that. So comparing mainly people that are changing bloodlines and going for more using NLW as part of their selection and using those different rams. So we've got sites kicking away this year, but keen to get other people in that conversation as well. But we can have a genetic overlay in this one too. Did we say that tomorrow? Yeah. So really keen to see, I guess lots of anecdotal and real evidence that you go for reproduction genetically and you get a massive shift. But we've got lots of people who've changed bloodlines and seen massive changes. Just basically to try to quantify that properly without, just to see the range to tell the story for enhancing reproduction. That one's a little bit of a formal focus where the major gap is, I suppose. But keen to see what happens. Certainly in our central progeny test type data, you see, even though we think number of lambs weaned is a useless breeding value because it's slowly accurate, but it's pretty well correlated with how those daughters perform. And so we'll be wanting to do that commercial scale. Thanks, Steve. Any other questions or comments?
So just in terms of next steps, so I guess you have that the group tomorrow and next week, and then what can you put something out through the network? Is that how it would work to try to?
Yeah. So everyone that's
information on who wants to do what or nothing or just observe.
Yeah. So we'll so this the people that signed up to this, and just correct me when I'm wrong, Waller. People that sign up to this will their emails will have, and that's linked only to this project, and so we can send out emails, regular updates and stuff, and have other Zoom calls and keep them as a group. and that's whether whether it's internal or external to mixed genetic. Is that right, Paula?
Yeah, and all the recordings will be in that area as well. And I just put the link for the reproductive and land survival on the chat. So if you want to be involved in that as well, just get your email in there, so then you'll be involved in that conversation as well.
Can I, just before we finish, can I just ask for anybody's tips and wrinkles about maidens and mothering? We still have problems basically with our first timers. How on earth do we improve the bonding and the mothering up? We have probably about 40% of them who drop the lamb and say, you want it, you look after it. It's got nothing to do with me. And it's damn hard work, because we can't afford to lose those lambs, and we certainly don't want to be bottle feeding them. So there's a hell of a lot of intensive work goes on to ensure that those ewes bond with those lambs. And it does take quite a long time. So I know our system is different, and I know you're probably lambing out in paddocks. So if it survives, it survives. If it dies, it dies. But is there any advice anybody could give me on what they've done that they found works with maidens?
I think everyone will be outside. And
Yours are shedded, Leslie, aren't they?
They are, Martin, yes.
In
yes.
a big pen, or in individuals or groups of 10, or how's it done?
Well, we've done it in big pens, and we've had a mix of age groups, and so we've had experienced ewes alongside maidens. We haven't experienced much in the way of theft of lambs from older ewes. That hasn't happened. It's just that the maidens will drop their lambs and clear off. So this year, for the first time, because we're AIing everything and seedering everything, everything's going to lamb within batches of 48, 72 hours. So we're going to individually pen everything, which hopefully will cut down some of the work. And we're doing that partly to ensure that we don't have to work quite so hard. In other words, the ewe can't move away from the lambs. She's damn well got to stay with them. So we're trying both. This year will be the first time we've individually penned.
How many did you have in the pens before, Leslie? Like, you put it down to possibly a privacy thing?
I think we've had a maximum of about 20. They've got plenty of space. They're big pens. We have a huge shed here. We're very lucky. Huge pens, really relative. They've got loads of space. You know, that's not a problem. They always gravitate to the back wall of the shed pens to lamb, and we leave them alone. We do the classic things, you know, we just observe from afar, and providing they're fine, we just leave them to it.
How many square metres of sheep? Like 10 square metres or 5? Or what would you think?
I think we've probably got at least 5 square metres per sheep. We err on the side of keeping numbers low in each pen. We really do. You know, we try and give them the maximum possible space, particularly the maidens. If we've got a batch of maidens in with older ewes, you know, the numbers come down. So we try and give them as much space as possible to avoid any problems. But it's still, they're not interested. They look at them and say, don't want them.
I've got some semen you need, I reckon, Leslie.
Yeah.
I reckon there's like some really high reproductive, and sheep which still have Italian spinners wool on them. There's one ram we use a lot over here, plus 30 for NLW, and I don't reckon they'll leave their lambs.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's your genetics aren't known for their mothering ability. The general.
I think that's the part of the problem. You know, it is a genetic thing. It's a trait. They're not really interested in having lambs. But on the other hand, you know, when you do get over it, when you force the issue, it's fine.
Yeah.
But the work involved in getting them to do that is tremendous.
It'd be interesting, and you're never going to do this, but it would be interesting if you whacked like a terminal over them, and see how that lamb vigor changes her behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty vigorous lambs, to be honest. You know, they're good and lively, and they bawl their heads off when they're born.
Yeah,
They're
right.
doing, the lamb's doing all the right things. It's just that the mother isn't interested.
Oh, yeah.
But it's my fault for keeping Saxons. That's what it is.
It's easier for you to say it than me.
You should get a good result being single pen, at least for the first 48 hours.
Yeah, and I think that's why we feel it's worth the extra work. We've invested in buying a heap of brand new hurdles. We've cleaned out a whole new, kitted out a whole new area of the middle of our barn. It's all, you know, all really well set to go. We're going to have about 50 individual pens for each group, and we'll be fine, I think. But we'll give it a go and we'll see. At least it means we're not going to be chasing ewes and lambs around the pen at 2 o'clock in the morning. So
I think Jill's got a question there about how often to weigh them. I mean, Jill, from the PDS point of view, I guess if one of the comparisons was, you know, different weights at joining, you know, I'm just guessing here. We haven't confirmed all this, but I think we'd want to have a group, you know, maybe it's as per what you normally manage, and then maybe another group which might be, you know, normal plus 4 or 5 kilos. And I guess to achieve that, I think we would probably just need to weigh a sub-sample of the mob, you know, every month, every 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. It's not weekly weighing and every sheep type stuff. I mean, obviously it's got to be reasonably practical as well. But I think, yeah, something like 4 to 6 weeks, you know, would probably be the frequency that we'd need to monitor, so we make sure we do get some differences come joining time.
Thank you.
And we're talking about, I think Ferg made the comment, for anyone who may down the track be interested in a comparison, it's, you know, let's say you've got 1,000 maidens, you know, that we need at least 200 in the, let's call it the treatment group. Okay, you don't have to split them down the middle and feed it 500 extra, but you know, we would need at least two. Well, that's probably the best design, but you know, at least 200 I think would need to be in the treatment group. But you know, that doesn't mean to say, you know, Leslie or James, if you're just building numbers, we still can't learn something from your flocks, you know, contributing data on live weights and scanning data and whatnot. So it can all help and all help us learn a bit more.
Do you think it's so much about hitting a target weight as such, or is it about getting to joining date and knowing that they're growing at X or Y or what?
It's one we don't. It's another example nugget of not knowing. As I did say last week, that in adults, I think it is about the weight when the ram hits them. You know, so if they are if they are growing, you know, at 100 grams a day, they're going to be 1.5 kilos heavier on average when the ram hits them, and you get an extra 3%. As you know, in the ewe lambs, there's a huge effect over and above the extra bit of live weight. You know, you grow them quicker, they're a bit heavier, but then you get that much benefit because they're growing quicker. You know, there's an additive effect. I hope I said that clear enough. In maidens, in 20-month-olds, I don't actually know whether it is just live weight or if there is something additional about you know, plain nutritional, call it what you want.
And
that effect in new lambs is pretty big. It's you know, extra 100 grams a day during joining is worth 20%. So at least the data from your place. So in other words, 100 grams a day during joining has the equivalent effect as an extra 4 or 5 kilos at the start of joining, okay, in new lambs. That, yeah, I don't know whether that applies in 20-month-olds, and it'd be lovely to find out. That might be another treatment in itself, you know, or another comparison. We manage them as per normal to joining weight, but you feed a group a bit better through joining.
Yeah.
That'd be a wonderful comparison. And then you put them back together again, scan them, and you know, probably got to manage them together. You know, maybe we wouldn't even follow them through to it'd be nice to follow them through to weaning, but that introduces lots of complexity. I think maybe we'd probably just scan them and scan them the year after. You know, we'll work that out.
Yeah.
Good question.
What was Alfonso's paper on Russ?
Yeah, it was about sort of getting an early ovulation and then a pause and then joining them later, and they're having some success.
Yeah.
That was the same with having rams in early.
Yeah.
Having them grow in a intersex relationship tended to get a more reliable ovulation later.
So rams in pre-puberty or?
Yeah, pre-puberty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty obscure. I'll have to hunt the papers down, but I'm pretty sure I've got them.
So running teasers would that have an impact?
Yeah, the same deal, I think. Yeah, so teasers in with what they're doing here is teasers in with like a traditional ewe lamb joining, I suppose, like when you'd normally put out a ram if you're joining ewe lambs. Just chucking teasers in.
Joining them as ewe lambs?
No, not joining them until 20-month-old. So just chuck the teasers in, get them to cycle a few times, get the dodgy embryos out of the way, and then join them at 20-month-old as normal.
Was your question that, Steve, or teasers for joining ewe lambs?
I was just thinking that we're shearing these next couple of weeks, and I was going to put teasers with all our ewe lambs, and then take them out for a month and try that.
So you're for a traditional ewe lamb join? Well, not traditional. A ewe lamb joining you're talking?
Yeah, going on my end.
You might have to send me a carrier pigeon, mate. Okay.
Yeah, can't hear you, Steve. But yeah, if you are joining them as ewe lambs, yeah, I think teasers for 13 to 15 days, and then switch them with the mature rams. But I think teasing of ewe lambs is definitely part of best practice.
So try out now at 4 months of age, and just run them with the ewe lambs until right before joining at 7 months.
No, well, again, there's others on the line who do it in the real world, but no, I would just put them in at 6.5 months, and 15 days before your rams normally go in.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
What's like a ewe mortality or the maiden mortality? What do you aim for?
What's as good as you get, Tommy?
In your lambs or your hoggets?
Hoggets, and then compared to the mixed age.
I actually can't rattle the number. I was going to say the average is around 4%. Doesn't mean to say that's a good number. But what I can, the number does exist. Look, there's a project currently run out of Victoria by Livestock Logic, and they've been collecting a fair bit more data on ewe deaths and cause of death. So I can certainly chase that up and see if they've got maidens or hoggets versus the rest, and let you know.
Oh, that's okay. I had 4% this year, and I didn't think it was very good. So just.
Yeah, I think it's average, so yeah, maybe 2% or something like that might be a more reasonable target, but I'm making that up on the fly a bit.
Ferg, is it warranted to? Oh, sorry. Is it warranted to have like what are your thoughts say on paddock size, and then do we need to be typically 2% rams in here in Australia? Is it maybe should it be 3% for maidens? Would that help maybe for some operations? I don't know. We're sort of running at an average of 35 hectares, I suppose, for our paddock sizes, which is considered really quite small over here in West Oz. So I don't have so much of a problem, but we're a lot different. We're all single size as well. But for the commercial operation, maybe is 3% rams better, and make sure we keep that paddock size small.
So we've certainly got different people with different opinions, and I certainly have heard Russ talk about high numbers for those particularly younger sheep. And you being a ram bred nugget would definitely think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Well, I know for ewe lambs, we keep it up at around, as high as we can get it. So we're up to sort of, 5-6% of mature rams that have sort of been around the traps a little while. yeah, that's sort of the practice that we've been going with, but with varying results every year, of course. But yeah, I just don't know whether maybe industry needs to look at it slightly differently with you know, the traditional maidens.
Yeah, and Russ, you'll have some thoughts here, Russ.
Yeah, a couple of things. Couple of things is that the ram effect is not always reliable in ewe lambs. It's a variable. It doesn't always trigger. But if it does trigger and you have an ovulation, you really need to capture the pregnancy, because there seems to be, if they don't become pregnant or you trigger an early ovulation through mistake sometime earlier in the season, there does seem to be a repressive effect later in the season. So it's really important to have, you know, enough ram power that if you actually trigger the ovulation, they can be captured. Otherwise, you know, like you just create another variable of failure.
So if you put in a teaser where you're not going to capture ovulation, you're saying that can have a detrimental effect.
If you put the teasers out and it triggers them up, and then there's not enough ram power to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
You know, like you may not get them into. They may just have that first cycle and then drop right off.
Yeah.
So you've missed them completely. So ram power is really important.
Isn't the window only smaller too? Aren't they only cycling for the 9 hours or 8 hours compared with 14 hours or whatever it is?
Yeah, it's much shorter.
Much shorter. So just on that basis, you'd want higher ram power.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your rams are going to be stuffed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to pre-qualify, I have no rams to sell.
Sure, you can find some.
I can help you out.
I think you had Paul Kenyon on Ferg on one of your chats, and Paul certainly summarised all the work out of New Zealand, or their work, and you know, 2% even in ewe lambs is still enough. It's a little bit like camping, isn't it? It's about your attitude to risk, and whether you know, if you've got plenty of rams around hanging around, you might as well chuck some extras in, but, which obviously Nugget can do. But, so I guess that's a long way of saying I can't see why in 20-month-olds you'd need more than 2%. But, you know, don't have much data.
Well, we've single-side ewe lambs before, and we'll never do it again, but we haven't done it since. That was the first year we joined ewe lambs, and we haven't done it since. And we just sort of put it down to just not having enough ram effect.
I guess
sorry.
Oh, just that same year, they know we had single side mated with a ram, or the year after that, we single side mated with ram lambs over ewe lambs and got 100% pregnant, didn't we? 100% pregnancies. That was in MFP, was it? MEF, sorry. MEF ewes, I'm pretty sure we had, so, I mean, I guess but that's all in a really close quarters where they couldn't get away from, so it's a completely different scenario. So it is probably all about just small numbers of, density and maturity.
That's what I was going to mention over here. Obviously, the last couple of years with a lot of confinement feeding, I think ram numbers can be back a bit, and maybe there's an argument that if you have too many rams, they end up bashing into each other a fair bit as opposed to doing the job. So lower numbers in confinement. But out in the paddock, we would normally, like Hamish said, would put a few more rams with our maiden ewes.
It's one of those things, you don't want to, like Thomas said, it's the attitude to risk. You don't want to go short on rams, and like dry ewes aren't particularly productive for you. Cool. Any other questions, comments? Righto. We'll stay here, and if people do want to go around and talk, but we'll wrap it up in saying that we've got another one of the front end of this part A tomorrow night, and then another one of these following that, and then we'll keep information coming out to you. We'd love if you want to email us, and if you haven't been comfortable saying something or you think of it later, let us know by email or any other way you want to communicate with us. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks for your contributions. This is a really interesting area in the sense that you would think we'd know all of the answers, but we don't. And so, I think it will be great if over the next couple of years, 3 years, we can sort of relatively regularly meet a few times, whatever the number is, throughout the year with new information, as well as updating each other on I weighed my ewes at joining, and they scan this, and just as we start to build that database, I think it'll be useful. And yeah, happy to have your suggestions on what you'd like to hear about as we go through that.